Shabbat Shalom. This parsha is consumed with the notion of tzedek, righteousness, justice, the way we wish the world were. And it also acknowledges that our part in that is vital, and yet the challenge is enormously vast. But our tradition does not shy away from putting into words how things ought to be. And even if we're not there yet, while we are here, we are never to lose hope. Hirsch's father said the other day at his levaya, Od lo avda tikvatenu. Our hope is not yet lost. And despite what we see in the world, what we read or can't bear to read in the news, what we know happens in our own communities, in our own streets, in our own homes at times, and in faraway places in the world, and we might so desperately want to shut our eyes and be anywhere else. We cannot be anything other than as we are, which is flawed human beings, and yet made in God's image. Human beings have a unique job, and it is to honor existence by our actions and our words. I don't know if the other creatures of the planet do that in their own way. But human beings who have the unique ability to destroy everything in sight have to make a commitment to living in a way that does honor to the gift that we are given. And despite the many deeply difficult passages in Parashat Shoftim, there is such an undercurrent of how we are to live in harmony with this world, that we are not separate from it, we are one with it. Shoftim is a beloved parsha for those who embrace a program, a life path of environmental respect and care. I've said for years that in our noisy and contentious and sadly in this time hateful political sphere, there really is only one issue, and that's the environment. Because if we don't have a livable environment, the rest of this is garnished. So this parsha is especially beloved by environmentalists of all spiritual persuasions because it contains in it the commandment not to destroy. And we just said those words in the prayer for peace. We have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love. So why, my friends, do we spend so much time hating and destroying? So this parsha teaches us to not destroy. It's not in the section that was read today. It's in the third triennial, but in a parsha that says tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice, or righteousness, righteousness, you shall pursue. This is something to pursue. So if you still have your Etz Chaim with you, your red Torah book, you can take a look, or I'm happy to read the verse for you. This is Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 19. When in your war against a city, you have to besiege it a long time in order to capture it. You must not destroy its trees. Lo tashchit et etza, wielding the axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. And this is the standard translation of the next phrase. Are trees of the field human that can withdraw before you into the besieged city? Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, lavo mipanecha b'matzor. The Hebrew is lo tashchit. Over time, the rabbinic Hebrew adapted that to bal tashchit, which some of you may be familiar. Not to destroy the trees of the field. The Torah acknowledges, and we have to acknowledge as well, this is a parsha and this is a tradition that ultimately did come and conquer a land. There were people living there. And to say we are still wrestling with that to this very millisecond is to perhaps give the understatement of this century. But this was the way that peoples moved through the world and established cultures and civilizations. I cannot change that, and neither can any of you. But inherent in this movement of peoples is an undercurrent of respect for the natural world that gave birth to us. It's an odd question, though, the way it's translated. Are trees of the field human to withdraw before you? Making it even smaller, are trees of the field human? Now, those of you who've come up to the Torah or spent any time looking at the Hebrew will know that even in the vocalized and cantillated Hebrew, there is no punctuation. So we're inferring from the words when we have a question, when we have an exclamation. Sometimes the melody helps a little with that. But Hebrew is a marvelous, mysterious language, and words can be translated, as we know, certainly from Torah study, many different ways. It's an odd question. Are trees of the field human? Rabbi Matthew Sofer teaches that our tradition's great interpreters, I like the way he says this, treated the Torah not merely as some kind of rule book or simply a myth of origin, but as a canvas upon which to paint their own ultimate questions. The 13th century grammarian Ibn Ezra painted upon this canvas a distinct interpretation of that verse. He reads, Ki Adam Eitz Hasadeh, not as a question, are trees of the field human? But rather as a statement. Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, that it is the human being that is the tree of the field. Ibn Ezra taught that by equating human life with the life of a tree, the destruction of that tree was tantamount to the destruction of human life. And by extension, the protection or sparing of that tree is equal to protecting or affirming human life. In another 13th century Spanish work, Sefer HaChinuch, we are taught the purpose of this mitzvah, not to destroy, bal tashchit, is to teach us to love that which is good and worthwhile and to cling to it, so that good becomes a part of us, and we will avoid all that is evil and hateful and destructive. This is the way of the righteous and those who improve society, who love peace, that nothing, not even a grain of mustard, should be lost to the world, unlike the wicked, who rejoice in destruction and are thus destroying themselves. For Sefer HaChinuch, not destroying a tree is about embodying the attitude that we should regret destruction and prevent it any time we can. To choose otherwise is what defines people as giving over to their evil selves. not to mention that they are also self-destructive. Our mitzvot, which in this season leading up to the high holidays, we might translate, maybe anytime, as our obligations to humanity and to the divine presence. These commandments challenge us to pay attention to the ultimate encounter with life itself. Every human being is a powerful variable in constant vacillation between the forces of destruction and the forces of creation. There is a Hasidic teaching that I brought last year to our Elul session in preparation for the high holidays. I'd like to revisit it because it pleases me to do so and because it references this parsha. There's a Hasidic teaching that says there are 5 most important mitzvot in the entire Jewish tradition. And the first one comes from this week's parsha. Tamim tihiyeh. Be wholehearted with God, Deuteronomy 18:13. Shiviti Adonai, place the divine presence before you, from Psalms 16:8. Ve'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, Leviticus 19:18. Bechol derachecha da'ehu, wherever you go, recognize the divine presence, from Proverbs 3:6. And hatznei lechet im Elohecha, walk humbly with your God, from Micah 6:8. The first letter of each of these verses, Taf, Shin, Vav, Vet, and He, spell out the Hebrew word teshuvah, the Jewish concept of return or repentance. A few days ago, we began the month of Elul. This is the month we are to practice behaviors that encourage us to return to our holiest selves. Our Torah portion cries out, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh. The human being is a tree of the field. Please, friends, let's ask ourselves, how often do we give in to the seduction of hate and destruction? Do we help or do we hurt? Are we using our words lovingly or harshly? Do we help ourselves grow and others to do the same? Or do we cut ourselves and others down? And worse, take joy in that? Midrash Rabbah teaches that every blade of grass has its own angel, nudging it from the heavens and whispering to it, grow, grow. We are here in the month of Elul, a time in which we, like blades of grass and like the trees of the field, return again and move toward the celebration of the birth of creation. And our tradition begs us to grow and plant, to sow and reap with joy and love. Any other path is to deny the beautiful gift of this earth. Let us help one another and ourselves to keep growing. Shabbat Shalom.